Hi friends, today I'm going to teach you how to make the best Reuben sandwich you have ever eaten. I'm going to give you special tips and tricks that are going to make it super successful. First, let me show you the ingredients you need. So here's all you need. The ingredients are relatively simple. You need a corned beef brisket. You can either use point cut or flat cut. Either is fine. These do cook down considerably. You need Swiss cheese, whatever type you like. You need rye bread. I prefer seeded. I believe that the seeded adds a flavor that is missing when you don't use the seeded. You need sauerkraut. This could be homemade, it could be bagged, it can be canned, but make sure you stay tuned for special pointers on using the sauerkraut. And you need Thousand Island dressing. Your choice of variety on that as well. So as you can see, the ingredients are simple. There's not many. It's more about the technique and preparation, I believe. So we are Reuben enthusiasts here, and we know a good Reuben. I have never had a Reuben quite like these homemade Reubens. Now you can buy corned beef sliced in the deli. You can buy pastrami and use that instead. Lots of different things you can do, but I highly recommend that you buy a corned beef brisket and you cook it the way I'm going to show you how. We're going to roast it in the oven slowly so it's nice and tender. We are not going to put it in a pot of water, and I really recommend you do not put it in a pot of water either for this purpose today here. So buying corned beef sometimes for me is a little difficult. It's not always easily accessible all times a year for me where I live. What I do whenever it is on sale and everywhere around St. Patrick's Day, early March, I buy up a few roasts and I throw them in my freezer. And then I just use them throughout the year whenever we want Reubens. I also sometimes will make up some extra sandwiches and freeze them, and then we will reheat them. So today I'm preparing for a special dinner. The request was Reubens. I'm gonna make up 2 large roasts, which are gonna cook down considerably, and hopefully have some extra sandwiches to put in the freezer for people to enjoy at a later time. So first step, we need to get the roasts in the oven. Okay, so first thing you want to do is preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Now, the corned beef is going to vary in size. This one is almost 5 pounds, and this other one is like a little closer to 4.5 pounds. So for each pound, you're going to cook an hour. And for the increments that are over a pound, you're going to round to the nearest quarter hour. So this 4.83 pounds, I'm going to round it to 5 pounds, and I'm going to roast for 5 hours. I have 2 roasts. I'm going to cook them together, so I'm going to be checking my temperature just to make sure. I definitely don't need to increase the temperature increase the time to 10 hours for these 2, because they are 2 separate pieces of meat. So do yourself a favor, open these in the sink and have your pan right beside that you're going to use. So what I have, this is just a 9x13. I don't know if you can see it, but there is about 1 inch of water in the bottom and a rack sitting on top. Now I like to give the rack a little spray with nonstick spray, because what we're going to do is take our roasts out, set them right on top, fat side up. Okay, so here it is. You're going to be surprised how much this cooks down. It's quite incredible. It is going to add more liquid to our liquid reservoir down below. So you don't want that to be too full, but you do want liquid down there so we don't dry our roasts out. Now I want to show you something here on the packaging. The way I am showing you to cook this is sometimes on the packaging and sometimes not on the packaging. But it is very important that you cook it this way. This will result in the best corned beef. So you can see here it tells you to throw it in a pot of water. Don't do that. Do not put it in a pot of water. I also have point cut. There is point cut, there is flat cut. People feel strongly about which to use. Flat cut is a little more expensive. I feel like I do fine with point cut. Sometimes I get some of both. It really depends what I can get that is a larger size roast, because finding the larger size roast is a little more difficult. Now you should have this little spice packet included in with your roast. If not, you can Google how to mix up some spices, or you can even do without. I've done without before, but I do like to use it. I think it adds a nice flavor. So I just took these right out of the package, kind of drained off the liquid, laid them here. I'm kind of focusing on keeping them within the parameters of the 9x13, and now I'm going to take these spices and just kind of rub them over the top of the corned beef. There they are, and you're just going to kind of rub it around. Now fat side does go up sometimes, particularly with point cut. It's not like a whole slab of fat on the top like it is with a flat cut, and that's okay. Just look for the majority of the fat, because the idea is as it's roasting, the fat is going to trickle down into the meat, and it's just going to help it be delicious. But okay, so there we go. Now we're going to take a large piece of foil. We're going to wrap it over this whole shebang here, and we're going to put it on the middle oven rack for 6 hours. No, I'm sorry, 5 hours, because I was approaching 5 pounds in one of them. Then I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to peel back the foil, and we're going to take a temperature check and see if we need to cook more or if we're done. Here we go, all ready to put in the oven. Now be careful when you're lifting this huge apparatus that you've created, that you are getting the pan, not the rack, when you're lifting it, so you don't have a spill. Now I know it looks intimidating, that this is 5 hours before I can even make my sandwiches. Now chances are you're probably not going to have as large of roast as I am the first time anyways, and just because you roast these today doesn't mean you have to make your sandwiches today. So you could roast these one day and then, make the sandwiches another day. I happen to be doing it all in one day. This is really the hardest part right here, right now. Just getting these in, having the time for this, but this does result in the best cooked corned beef product. If you've never had home cooked corned beef that has been roasted in the oven slowly in this way, you have not truly had good corned beef. So give it a try, give it the effort, and you will not be disappointed. So let's get this in. Right, it has been 5 hours, and I have carefully removed it from the oven. You can see it's steaming up a storm. So when I open this foil, I need to be very careful. Be careful, you don't want to scald yourself. Look at those. These are pretty good. And look at all the extra juices there now. All right, let's take a temperature check. So we're going to go for a real thick, deepen part here. We're looking for at least 160, and you can see I'm at 200 right now. Let's check another spot here. Okay, maybe here. Just gonna check some places. Okay, that one's not quite as hot, but we're dropping a little. 66, 65, 63. Oh, 59. 57. So we might need to put it back in a couple minutes here where this was overlapping. It's 82. Now that's hot. And that's hot. I wonder if I stuck it so far it came back out the other end. Yeah, I think that's what happened. I think I was taking the temperature Okay. Yes, so this is done. Now, next step. Well, there's an optional step here. You could put this in and kind of roast it with the foil off for maybe 5 minutes to kind of crispy this up a little bit. I would do that if I was serving this as a main course on its own, not in a sandwich. But for me, this is done cooking, and now what I'm going to do is allow this to rest. It's going to stay really hot for a while, and if we cut it too soon, it's going to lose a lot of its moisture and natural juices. So the best thing is to let cuts of meat like this rest. So we're going to let it rest at least 20 minutes, maybe longer, because quite honestly, it's too hot for me to deal with even after 20 minutes. So I will bring you back when I'm ready to cut it up. Now, while my corned beef is just resting, I'm going to work on getting this sauerkraut ready. So I would say this is tip number 2, essential tip number 2. So essential tip number 1, cook your corned beef the way I told you. Essential tip number 2, don't just strain your sauerkraut, which I'm doing right here now in the strainer, but squeeze out the excess liquid. One of the greatest mistakes of restaurants when they make a corned beef sandwich is they put this sopping wet sauerkraut on it, and the brine from the sauerkraut just kind of takes over the sandwich. It makes it soggy where it shouldn't be. It's just not nice. But I mean, really squeeze it out. So that is essential tip number 2. Squeeze out your sauerkraut really well. So I'm just going to squeeze all this out and put it in a bowl so it's ready for when I'm ready. Okay, so here it is. It's essentially, dry. It's light, fluffy. It's still wet, but there's no excess moisture liquid in it. The sauerkraut is supposed to be a part of the sandwich, and it's supposed to all come together, all these flavors, but the sauerkraut brine is not supposed to be the taste of the sandwich. Okay, so I have a roast here on my cutting board. I'm going to use a fork, and I'm going to use some serrated knives. Now, the important thing is when cutting this, and this is super tender, I can tell already, is we want to cut against the grain so that we have nice tender bits that are going to be easy to chew up, and people aren't going to be struggling with long pieces. So sometimes the meat changes direction as you're cutting it, but I can see right here is a great place to start. I'm also going to kind of trim any excess fat I see, and I'm just going to saw back and forth. I'm going to make about 1 inch wide cuttings. And it is so tender. Watch, I can probably just break it apart with my fingers. Do you see that? That is how corned beef should be. So I'm going to cut this all up, and I'm going to put it all over here on my little station I'm creating for assembling my Reubens. As I'm cutting this, I need to remember to keep an eye on the grain and, verify that I am cutting across the grain, and I am. Now this is a place where you could stop for one day. Like if you didn't want to do all this in one day, you could cook up your roast, wrap them in foil, put them in the fridge, slice them the next day, or you could slice them up, wrap them in foil, put them in the fridge. You can even use the foil from the top from baking, and then the next day bake your sandwiches. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the meat here right beside the sauerkraut so that I am ready to start assembling. So we're ready to assemble. I've got my pan over medium-low heat. I've got everything here that I'm going to need. My rye bread, I generally don't use the heels unless I get to the end of making my sandwiches and I still have corned beef, and then I will use them to make some sandwiches. Now, I do not use any butter or nonstick spray. It's not necessary. Years ago, I used to, and I found that I actually preferred the sandwiches without them. You'll still get a nice toast, but it won't be greasy on the hands, and you don't have to worry about, you know, that singeing on your pan. So I just put the rye bread down. Generally, when I'm making these, I'm making a couple at a time, and I just kind of alter my cheese to fit my bread because I don't want it to go over the edge. Generally, I do better with this, but I would probably just cut it with a knife to kind of, okay, so there you go. And then the other slice, we're also going to put cheese on. We want to cover as much of the bread portion as we can with cheese. Okay. And as that's warming and the cheese is starting to melt, we're going to build our sandwich. So first is going to come the corned beef, and I just take some pieces and kind of break it up a little and put it all over one side of the sandwich. You see that? Every single bite of sandwich, you're going to essentially have some yummy corned beef. It's going to easily go into your mouth without tearing sections out from the other sandwich. Now we're going to take our sauerkraut that has a nice, pleasant, mild flavor now because we have drained it and squeezed out the excess well, goes on top. Now, this is key point number 3. The Thousand Island dressing goes on top of that well squeezed out sauerkraut. That's going to help hold it on the sandwich. A lot of times at restaurants, you'll find either they put it on the really soggy sauerkraut, or they put it on top of the cheese, and they're, you know, it just makes a really, really messy sandwich. Now, I'm not saying this is going to be entirely clean, but that sauerkraut is just going to kind of hold it there. Now my cheese is starting to melt, you can see, and in another minute or two, I'm going to flip this over on top of our sandwich. Little side note, I really like it when I buy Thousand Island that has the like squeeze top. This one happens to not, but that does make this a little easier. I generally don't have like this little mess here, but that's okay. It's not the end of the world, and it's still going to be quite nice. So it was time to flip it over. You can see I have a nice browning, even without butter or oil. And I just kind of pat it down lightly, just to kind of, you know, take that melted cheese and kind of secure it in. And we're just going to wait a minute and flip it. Now flipped it. Now, as you can see, this side is a little browner, and that's normal. That's typical. There's a, you know, with the extra weight, it gets more contact. So we're just going to give the other side a moment to heat through a little bit, and this sandwich is finished. There it is. Now, I generally cut these in half with a serrated knife, again, a sawing motion, very carefully holding the sides. And then I generally put them on a platter for my family. Sometimes I wrap them up in a dry wax paper if I'm going to freeze them or refrigerate them. There it is. And I guarantee you this is the best Reuben you have ever eaten. So I hope you try this. I hope you wow your friends and your family, and make sure you follow those 3 key elements to the best Reuben. If I were to freeze these or store some in the refrigerator and then freeze them, I would use these. This is what I was referencing. kind of opens up like this. I wouldn't necessarily cut the sandwich in half, but I have one that's cut in half that I made for you. So I'm gonna put that on here. And I would just wrap it up nicely and then put it in the refrigerator. When you're ready to freeze it and they're cold, put them in a gallon Ziploc freezer bag and freeze them. And then when you're ready to enjoy them, thaw them in the refrigerator for 24 hours and then put them in the oven on a baking sheet, 200 degrees, till they're nice and toasty and warm the whole way through. It'll be just like you just made it. And there you have it. Ready for the fridge. Just put it on a plate.